Welcome to Round Glass. Thanks for joining me in this meditation on 6 attitudes for inner peace. My name is Sarah Blackburn. Of all of the attitudes that we can cultivate for our well-being, joyful effort is said to be the one that fuels all of the other attitudes that we're trying to grow within us. And this work of cultivating certain attitudes is oftentimes difficult. So, joyful effort helps us to keep it alive and keep us from getting discouraged. Because if we're going to be trying to let go of our attachment or work on our anger, it's really helpful to have this attitude of joy to support us through it. So in this session, we'll look at how to grow that attitude of joy and then use it as a tool and fuel to transform our inner world and also the outer. But before we dive in, as usual, I like to hear from you. So if you can share in the chat, what do you do to keep joy alive? And while you're typing that, I'll quickly give you the plan for this session. So this is the 4th session out of a 6-session series on cultivating an attitude that will bring us a deeper state of peace and then therefore have a profound impact on our life. So we'll begin the session by discussing what we mean by joyful effort in this context. It's a little bit different than the way we normally think of joy. And then we'll talk about how to practice it and infuse it with the other types of inner work that we'll do. And now it's time to hear from you. I can't wait to hear, what did you say you do to keep joy alive? And a quick thank you to everyone who shared in the chat. It's always such a pleasure. I see we have someone who said that they hang out with their 8-year-old daughter. And it's incredible how kids can find joy in almost anything. Wow, thanks so much for sharing that. Yes, kids are experts at having joy. And then we have someone else who said that they look back at old vacation photos and images of friends. That always helps. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then she says that she could use a little more joy in her day. I totally know the feeling, and we'll talk about how to do that in this session. And I'm also seeing that people dance and they smile, they lift weights, or hang out with the dogs, loved ones. All of those things are great ways to keep joy alive. Thank you so much for sharing. I share in so many of those ideas that you have to keep your joy going. And let's talk about how we can use those things for this attitude of joyful effort. So I want to start by getting clear on what we mean by joyful effort in this context, because it's different than the normal way we think of joy. This type of joy has to do with having fun and celebrating when we do something good. Again, joyful effort in this context is feeling good and having fun doing positive work and helping others. So it's different than that simple feeling of joy that arises when something good happens to us. In this context, we are actively creating a feeling of joy so that it sticks in our mind, grows like a seed, and then over time it will flower into an experience of having more joy. So let me explain some of the ways this might look in our life. This idea of joyful effort would be something you would cultivate when, for example, you had a big move coming, or maybe you were going to spring clean your house. When there's something challenging that might be difficult, that's where this idea of joyful effort comes in. And we infuse it with something that might challenge us. So if we're spring cleaning or moving and letting go of things we no longer need, we can cultivate joyful effort at the same time, so that task becomes something more meaningful and easier to do. One more example would be a time I used it in my life, which was when my mother got very, very sick a few years ago. And she was in a hospital, and it was a very hard time. We didn't know what was wrong, what would happen. And I called upon this attitude of joyful effort. As her primary caregiver, I would spend time contemplating my joy and making a plan to keep it alive before I would go into the hospital and sit with her for 16, 18, 20 hours. It was a conscious decision to bring about positivity, celebrate every tiny win, and use it to manage all of the hard emotions that would come up for me. So I hope that helps understand the concept of joyful effort. It boils down to being an attitude that gives us an unshakable strength to face whatever comes up in life, be it the good things where joy is easy, or the difficult times when it's a lot harder to stay positive and have joy. So let's dive into a meditation and look for those moments in our life and practice cultivating joy. Find a comfortable position that you can sit in for the next 15 or so minutes as we meditate. Often that means bringing some alertness to your back and relaxing the rest of your body. It's nice to look at the areas where you typically have tension. So your shoulders and your face, you can use your exhale to let those areas release. And then let your eyes fall closed if that's comfortable for you. And begin to bring your attention to the sensations of breathing. Wherever you notice that inhale and exhale most prominently, you can zoom into that area of the body. So maybe the breath is most obvious at your abdomen, at the chest, or at your nose. Wherever you prefer, start to zoom in and follow those sensations as the body moves with your inhale and exhale. And then if you notice you're feeling especially agitated and your mind is busy, bring more attention to your exhale. Or if you're feeling especially sleepy and your mind is maybe slow and you feel heavy, you can focus on the inhale as a way to brighten up your mind. Now recall a time in your life when you had a challenge or some difficult circumstance happen, and you were able to keep your joy alive. Maybe there was a time when you changed your job or had a big move. Find a moment when you found yourself up against a challenge, but you were able to stay positive and hold some joy through the transition or the obstacle. And if that is a challenge, you can also think about a time when you helped a friend or a family member keep their joy as they faced some struggle. But find a moment where keeping a sense of joyful effort through the stressful times was helpful for you. And begin to remember that moment. Start to examine what it was about your inner attitude that made it possible to face that challenge with joyful effort. As you think back to that time in your own life or perhaps in someone else's life, begin to look for specific things you did. Was there a phrase that you repeated over to yourself each day? Was it the people and the community that surrounded you and the situation? Was there some sense that the transition would be positive in the end. Look for the things that carried you through. Now, if you have a past experience where you had joy that carried you through a tough time, try and connect to that feeling right now. Or if there wasn't a specific time or experience of it, use your imagination to think of how it could be, to have fun doing positive things, to try and enjoy when you do something that you know is right and good. Now begin to think through the things that you know bring you happiness and keep you positive. What fires up your inner joy? What are the things you know you can use if life gets challenging to keep you feeling up or happy? And it can be as simple as taking a walk and getting fresh air. Maybe sitting with a warm cup of tea in the morning. Or talking with a friend. And go through a couple of the things that bring about a sense of peace and joy, regardless of what might be happening around you. And then with those things clear in your mind that bring you a sense of peace, think through a scenario that might pop up in your life at some point in the future and might be a challenge or a difficulty you could potentially face. And then as you imagine that scenario, try and rewrite how it might have normally played out by infusing joyful effort into your response to this potentially challenging scenario. What could you do to have joy in the face of future obstacles? And take another moment to think of all the ways you could bring joy into a challenging situation. And then let go of that future scenario. Reflect on any insights you may have had around this idea of joyful effort and offer that out in whatever way feels authentic to you, to someone in the world who might need a little joy as they face some challenge in their life. Now begin to return to the present moment. Become aware again of your surroundings. Notice the sounds, the smells, the light on your eyelids. Take a few more deep inhales and exhales. And when you're ready, you can begin to come out of the meditation and open your eyes. So now that we've had a chance to cultivate joyful effort and think about how we could infuse it in our life, I hope you will take this practice with you, either into your next meditation or perhaps into your next challenging situation in your life. we still have some time for any questions or comments that may have come up around that idea or even just meditation in general. So I invite you, please share those in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'll share something that often happens, at least it happened for me when I first learned this attitude of joyful effort. And it was that I wasn't sure how to cultivate joyful effort when I would be so overcome by the challenge or the obstacle I was facing. For me specifically, it had a lot to do with fear. And I wanted to share that some of the other attitudes that we've discussed in the series can really support the idea of joyful effort. By that I mean, if there is a challenge that you're about to face and you want to have joyful effort, but it's not feeling so natural, it's helpful to think about for example, the second attitude, which has to do with holding to our core values. It's helpful to think about why you would want to do what you're about to do and have that intention very clear. And then it's also helpful to practice dealing with the strong, often negative emotions beforehand. So you've got some internal practice dealing with the strength of some of the negative emotions. And then it makes it a little easier for joyful effort to arise when you've got that solid foundation. Another way to work with it is to recognize that joyful effort is a practice like so many of the other attitudes. And so even though we might work to cultivate it at the beginning of a challenge, we may lose it or it may come and go. But each time we actively try to cultivate that in our life, it's putting a powerful seed in the mind. And very much like seeds are in our outer world, they start off small. But the more we tend to it and can really harvest that seed, the more it will grow and the stronger it will get, so that our capacity to show up to the challenging situations with this unshakable joy gets stronger, and we're more able to use that attitude in our daily life. And then with that, there's also an opportunity to remember that joyful effort is there as support to the other practices we're doing and to the negative emotions. It doesn't mean that we're not supposed to experience the sadness or the fear in the face of the difficult challenge. You know, if it's something like grief or a deep hardship, they're not saying that you're not supposed to experience all of those other emotions. But what they're saying is that joyful effort can be like a life raft. If the grief or the sadness, the challenge or the fear feels like a sea that you're swimming in, joyful effort can appear as that raft to help us look for ways to learn from the scenario and carry us through, where we're able to celebrate the small things and find some positivity no matter what happens. But it takes time and practice. Okay, so that's what we have time for in this session. I'll leave you with just a little reminder that joyful effort is like your rocket fuel for this inner work we're proposing could really change your life. And so I hope you'll take it out and give it a go. I hope you have as nice of a time as I have had with it. That's all the time we have for now. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to my profile on Round Glass and see previous sessions or when I'll be going live again. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure meditating with you, and I'll see you the next time.